Grand Rising, everyone. Welcome to June 8th, 2025, Sunday. I'm going to want to ask if there are any questions. We had a good discussion yesterday. However, in searching my memory to give a recap, I'm coming up a bit blank. I would ask if you could give a recap on what we talked about yesterday, or let me ask if there are any questions from yesterday. No questions from yesterday? Barbara, do you mind helping us with a recap?
I would love to do that. However, I did take notes yesterday, but we did talk about a couple of things. We talked about the Saharan dust, and we talked about how that dust is carried on the wind, that the wind does not disperse it, that it has it's carried where it is meant to be, where the ancestors mean for it to go, and how that dust sort of mitigates chaos in situations as well. We talked about the fact that the hurricanes are not as active with that dust in the system. However, on the other hand, we also talked about the fact that tornadoes in the Midwest are still ongoing, and that for those experiencing those kinds of chaotic changes, they really feel the impact of the storms and not having the support that they would ordinarily have. I think we talked a little bit about meditation. We talked a bit about I don't know. Let's see if anybody else can add anything else.
Thank you. Appreciate that.
Yeah.
George?
Yeah. Also, I was just going to mention, that, Nick, started us out in terms of just talking about the importance of self-awareness, being aware, of the times and season that we're in. And he also, spoke about, the confrontation or the discernment between Musk and Trump, which is something else that was mentioned. But I think more importantly, just being aware of what's happening in the universe and how nature, is reaching out, and continually teaching us to appreciate the journey that we're on. Those are two things that came to my mind. I'm done.
Thank you. Anyone else? Because with those two, I think I see more clearly now.
Pastor, I have one comment.
Go ahead.
Grand Rising, honor to the ancestors. George gave a scripture about be anxious for nothing. That was very fitting also for yesterday, because sometimes I feel anxious about things happening in the universe and with mankind. So that was very fitting yesterday. I needed to hear that. That's all I wanted to say. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, that I'm glad you said that, Evelyn, because the discussion also was about in regards to that scripture, people thinking that things are not happening fast enough. With us realizing that the universe does not work on a timetable that we set. It does what it does on its own timetable. And we also spoke in reference to trying to shape things and doubt. if we are uncomfortable with the time frame that the universe works in, then that means that we are trying to shape things because we're trying to shape when it happens. And that's a short step from making an attempt to shape how it happens. So I think that that was very important. One of the very most important things that we talked about as well. So we have a three-tier thing here, I believe. Um, the sayings and being aware of the tension between Trump and Musk and what it means, and reminding us that the universe has to say so when it comes to how things are changing, when they're going to change. But we also mentioned during the discussion about the dust that we are the ancestors and the ancestors are us because we are spiritual beings and so are they. And the for lack of a better word, wall of separation between us, or the membrane, let me put it that way, as a permeable membrane that separates us is the action. We are in a body and they are not. They have had experiences in body and out of body. So that is one of the primary reasons that the ancestors are our guides. And the dust is a reminder of the presence of the ancestors as we travel this journey. Um, Realizing, as Barbara said, that the wind does not disperse the dust. Therefore, it means that this is spiritual, and we're being shown that it's spiritual by virtue of the dust sustaining itself and staying intact as the wind brings it across the ocean. And the idea of mitigating hurricanes is also a spiritual thing. So, having said all of that, and thank you guys for helping with this, I wanted to see if there are any questions or is there something that you have on your mind that you would like to speak to today or like us to help to speak to with you? Go ahead, Ron.
Well, I just want to make sure we're done, or no one has any questions or comments on what you just spoke of. But if we're going to something else, I want to see if S was on the phone. He started something last week. I can't remember if it was Sunday or Monday, and I didn't know if he was finished with it. And just to give him an opportunity to voice what he was discussing.
Are you on this?
Yes, I'm on.
Okay.
Just going back, I think we were just, talking about the mindset and energy with, we talk about the European mindset. And I guess the point I was, really trying to emphasize was that in that particular region, that they have moved on and sort of gotten away from that mindset, and we're here in America, in the U.S., we've taken that mindset to a new level. And I really think that I've had this quote that I gave Ron that I think greed is the overwhelming mindset. Racism is with the collateral damage, and so we have a racism everywhere in the world. And I think what I was saying from a European standpoint, their quality of life, their spirituality, it's better because they've sort of taken another step there. And when you look at the way they have female leaderships, I know we talked about Germany, but there are several other countries there too that they've allowed the feminine energy to kind of guide them and elevate them above it's almost like they're trying to move away from the European mindset. And when you look here, we still have more violence. We still have racism. We're there. They have those things, but they don't have Nazis walking in the streets, for example. They take better care of their people from a health and mindset and quality of life standpoint. And so I was just sort of like emphasizing why have they been able to transition in that direction. And it seems like we take a step back here. The fight's still going on in both eras, but I think the term of the European mindset, it's evolved here more because we have turned it into more violence and hatred, and so I think those things are kind of bubbling to the surface for us to kind of deal with more here. And from a quality of life standpoint, it seems that that's the battle that we're fighting here more than there. And so that's really what I was boiling it down to, because historically that's where it originated. But if we're living in the present, there's a difference there.
Okay. Any comments in reference to that? Ron?
Well, I see it a bit different than Ashton, and he and I had a discussion about it on last week. My difference is the European mindset, as we have discussed, doesn't have anything to do about the geographical area. It is a way of thinking and a way of life. I think what he describes within Europe is a step forward, but it has nothing to do with the African. The African mindset, for call it what lack of a better way of calling it something else, is one of love and compassion and unity. I think what S is describing is something that was started and ongoing without anyone in mind except other Europeans. Now, just because people may have moved there from India or from Africa or from any other land and have been inclusive of that, doesn't mean that this was intended for them, or the original intent was to get away from the greed and selfishness that the Europeans have had for centuries. That is a different thing. I think when we talk about a mindset, we're talking about
Excuse me a minute, please. I just have to go to the door, that's all.
okay. We're talking about a thing that's been rooted in the earth for centuries. So it is not just some ideology. This is something that is strongly rooted, and I don't think the few efforts that we're talking about gets rid of that. We're talking about something a complete change in structure of how you think and being inclusive of loving kindness and compassion to everybody. And I don't see that being done. So that's my answer to it. I don't think those actions that S is discussing was meant to be inclusive of everyone. It just so happens that people move there and they're benefiting from it. But that's a totally different than changing the mind and the way you think.
Oh, great. Go ahead, Audrey.
May I comment? Happy Sunday, everybody. I think about it a little differently too. And I hear you, S, But my contention is that it's the same, it's just not quite as evident in Europe right now. That whole mindset was based on the doctrine of discovery, where it gave them the right to do whatever they wanted in any other, with any other country or people who they deemed were not quote unquote Christian. And I think the difference between Europe and the US right now is that Europe abolished slavery very early on, and they didn't have the numbers of Africans in Europe like we did in the US. And the other part of that is because they took their racism to Africa as opposed to allowing Africans to come, meaning a large number of Africans to come into Europe. But in the US, it was all part and parcel, because our system was so based on what the European mindset considered to be the differences between the races. So all our laws and rules and social structure is based on racism. It's not so much that way in Europe because they didn't have that many Africans in their society to have to go that route. But I'll tell you, I've been in Europe a lot, and there is just as much racism there as there is in the US. But I agree with you. They've been able to move on a bit because most of their laws are not based in racism, like it is in the US. And I think that's the big difference. Most of their, because they didn't have the numbers and they didn't have the socio-cultural perspective in terms of keeping people down on the farm like we did in the US. So I think that's the big difference. Because in Europe, in Germany, there's still Nazi parties. There in France, there's Le Pen, Marianne Le Pen. She's just as racist as and wanting to do whatever to the immigrants, just the same as Trump does. So, you know, they're still there. They just don't have as much of a foothold as racism does here in the US.
May I add to that, Audrey?
Yeah, go ahead.
But they are gathering as much of a foothold as is in the US. Because
Starting to, yes, because more immigrants are coming into their countries now.
Well, Maloney in Italy is making an effort. But let me put it this way: the left in Italy wants immigration, wants citizenship to be lowered from 10 years to 5, and that's a huge fight in Italy. And the memorandum is not expected to pass because of Meloni's influence. Her whole idea is to leave Africa alone so that Africans won't be coming to Italy. And what she is proposing is to make it more difficult for anyone to become a citizen in Italy, with the exception of those who have Italian ancestry. And it doesn't matter where you live or how long you've been out of Italy. And if you never go back to Italy, you can apply for citizenship. And the reason they are doing it, as was put forth by her government, is because they want to keep a connection with the diaspora, because the birth rate is dropping so rapidly, and they are making an effort to bring Italians back to Italy because they need workers. And they do not want to open the doors for, as they put, foreign workers to come into Italy. In Poland, we are talking about the right-wing guy, or the dictator, the guy with dictator intentions, winning in Poland. But keep in mind, before that happened, when Russia invaded the Ukraine, the people in Ukraine were running towards Poland, the borders of Poland, to get away from it. And the Ukrainians and other Europeans who were there in Ukraine during that period of time were allowed entrance into Poland, but they blocked the entrance for all Africans into Poland. And it took international pressure for Poland to open the doors to allow Africans to cross their border. Now, when you think about the number of people who were boarding those trains to escape the bombs, and they were forcing Africans to stay in the line of fire, that was not 100 years ago, was not 25 years ago. It was just, I think, 15 years. No, Bomber was in, just a few years ago. I can't do it in my head right now. But, and then in Germany, the Conservative Party in Germany is the Nazi Party. They just don't call themselves that because the international courts pressured Germany into making Nazism unlawful. And for them to, Nazis do parade in the streets of America, but the reason it is so difficult in Germany is because it is illegal. In this country, nothing is illegal when it comes to white people. When it comes to Europeans, nothing is illegal. And if you think that I'm stretching it, then why is it that Trump is not in jail? All the things that he has been found guilty of, and he's not in jail, it means that when it comes to Europeans, the law applies based upon who you are or how they feel about you that particular day. So I don't see a huge difference in the way Europeans respond to people of color than it is in this country. And I agree wholeheartedly with Audrey saying that they did not have as many of us there. They went to Africa to take what they wanted and to build what they wanted. Cecil B. Rhodes, Vanderbilts, the Rockefellers, all of them robbed Africa. So they didn't need that many people, African people in Europe. I think of 1825 was it, that they ended slavery in England. So I don't see a major lifestyle change there. And as far as health concerns are taken into account, that is true. They do have a better healthcare system in Europe than is here. Because even if you were in Europe and something happened to you, you go to the hospital, but they deport you right after you get out of the hospital. However, when we were in Spain, there were large gatherings of Africans in areas, Barcelona, and they were street vendors. But every time they saw the police coming, they packed up and ran. So that those actions towards those immigrants is no different than the actions toward the immigrants in this country. Matter of fact, it is no different than the way that we as a people are treated as Africans in this country. So that's my 2 cents. I'm done. Thank you.
There's another part of this that has to be brought to light as well. Uh, America has to be, and this is strictly spiritual, and somebody can help me with this. America is the friction for the world as far as all of this is concerned. Without friction, there is no change. And that's why America's in your face. That's why America has the history that it has. Uh, with this movement, and this movement being the people on this phone, be as strong as it is if it was not, if we were in Europe or some other country. Uh, so America is isolated. And what I mean by that, uh, the African is being isolated here for a reason. And all of the ugliness is kind of in your face, and it must be seen and it must be dealt with from a spiritual way, not just a blending in as you see in the other countries. Because as Audrey and Pastor said, the energy is still there. It may on the surface look different, but somebody has to deal with the reality of the inhumane actions that we see. So that's the spiritualness of this, and someone may know a better way of saying that, but all of this is necessary that we see in America. That's why it looks so much different.
Yes.
Is it fair to say that the energy is different here? And I think back just even beyond predating that, I think everybody made, really valid points about it, and I didn't really want to like just solely focus on the racial aspect of it, more along the lines of the Cain and Abel side of it. That there is I think I was telling Ron last week that there's an unhealthy greed here that here produces more just collateral damage than anything. Like I think the greed and racism go hand in hand here more. But I was looking at it more just from that Cain and Abel mindset, sort of predating the European aspect of it. Like, why is, I mean, and I know it's necessary, and it's necessary for us to deal with that. And it all comes back because, racism gets more propelled forward because of the history and because of the greed here. And I guess the reason too is like my interactions with Europeans more recently and talking to them and hearing their mindset. It's a lot of this is kind of stem from having some honest conversations with them and perceptions of what we see and what they see in us. And so that's sort of like the genesis of it for me, is actually having some recent discussions with them and more in a different setting of that. But I don't know if we're that much different than them, and we all kind of want to see the same things changed. But I do think our energy here it's different. The way we go about things here as a country, it's different than the energy there. And I think a lot of that is that Trump's America now. It's bringing a lot of things to the surface for us to deal with. But I'm looking at it more from that unhealthy greed, that Cain and Abel mindset, and the racism is definitely coming along with it. But it's unique to hear their perspective. But
Thank you, sir. Anyone else? All right, thank you for bringing that, for this discussion that we just had. I think that when we look at when we look at the employment picture, when we look at the immigration, when we look at living conditions, I don't see that much difference between Europe and America. However, I do know that people have a tendency to think that Europe is better in terms of employment because, for example, France, they passed a law a few years ago in France that it was illegal for a company to require you to take your computer home. And it was illegal for a company to require you to work more than 7 hours a day. That spoke primarily to people who are in corporate positions. Because if you're picking up the garbage, you don't have a computer to take home anyway. So their work conditions and circumstances, they're there are written in law. However, it does not address the jobs that affect most of the people of color who lives in those countries, such as servants, maids, as I said, those who pick up the garbage, street sweepers, that kind of thing. And when you pull the cover back and look underneath, you see the same racism. And we cannot separate racism from economics. We cannot separate racism from greed. And Europeans are just as greedy as Americans, as Europeans in America. Those in Europe are just as greedy. And they are just as ruthless as is America. And the reason that they are defending Ukraine is not because they love the Ukrainians. It's because it's the strategic location of Ukraine, and Ukraine is the breadbasket of Europe. And they don't want Russia to control it. Plus, there is the Russian pipeline that crosses Ukraine. So there are several reasons that they don't want Russia to control. So the question becomes, what's the difference between America controlling the minerals in Ukraine as payment for keeping Russia out? What's the difference in that and Russia fighting Ukraine because they want to control that particular location for strategic reasons? What's the difference? It is two brothers fighting over the same thing for different reasons. Does that make sense, guys? Two brothers, two Europeans. The Europeans are fighting over Ukraine because they want it. And Ukraine, quite frankly, the Ukrainians are just as racist as anybody else in Eastern Europe or Western Europe, for that matter. I'm done. If there are no other questions or discussions about this, is there another area of questions that ought to be raised now? Okay. No questions, comments?
I have something. I was listening the last 24 hours, I guess, just hearing news feeds, and Washington seemed to throw around the word democracy a lot. I'm 66 years old. I don't know what a true democracy looks like. I know when not FDR, Teddy was running for his last presidency, or a third term, I think. He saw a glimpse of democracy and how the people were taken care of and how they didn't pay taxes, but there was no lack. There was nothing. And I meant to look up the part of Africa that he was in, and he spoke about that to anybody who would listen. But we throw around democracy, and I guess we, being the people on this phone, what it looks like to us is what we talk about when we talk about truth and love and compassion and those things. But any thoughts on that? Because you hear that word a lot, and I don't think you can find 10 people in this country that actually know how to talk about a good example of what a democracy is, what a true democracy is. Am I off base on that, or is it even something important? It's just something that grabs my attention every time I hear somebody say it.
Democracy. Well, let me see if anyone else want to address that. Okay. Democracy, as explained in America, is based upon what the Greeks called democracy, as opposed to what a true democracy is. The democratic governing force that came out of Greece is based upon a crude understanding of what African democracy is. This country is a republic. It has never been a democracy. It is a republic. The difference between a democracy and a republic is that the representatives of different states or different sections of this country, of a country, make the decision about what's going to take place in the country, and they are not truly tied to their communities when making these decisions. They have, in a republic, you don't have a sense of community at all. There are no tentacles that truly ties that nation or that country together. The decisions are made based upon the choice of the representative as opposed to the people that they represent. In a true democracy, if you look at the origins of it, it does indeed come from Africa. And the democracy, the foundation of democracy is there is a leader, namely a chief or king, however, a pharaoh, whatever you want to call it. But aside from that, there are representatives from each section or each village in this particular area. And those representatives in those villages do not live in the place of the king. They live within the confines of their village. And when there is when the king calls a session for a session to meet, each one leaves their village. And when they leave their village, they come and present to the entire body the desires of the people in that community, in that village. And the decisions are then made through a consensus, as well as input from the ancestors. This has never happened in this country. This has never happened in any European country, ever. So what is being called a democracy that is actually a republic is truly a quasi-dictatorship. And in a quasi-dictatorship, you do not choose your leaders. You choose who has been in front of you to lead. We have never, as Africans in particular, chosen leadership that we desire. We simply vote for the lesser of the two evils. And though the people who think that they are actually choosing their leaders, particularly Europeans with very little means, always vote against their self-interest because they are convinced that they can be greedy just like the greedy rich people are. They can make it to that place. So this is not about being a democratic country. It is not about experiencing what a true democracy is. In a true democracy, there is no need. Everyone has everything they need to survive. That does not happen in a dictatorship, and it does not happen in a republic. So that's what I have learned a democracy is or isn't. I hope that helped, Ron.
And I suppose then that's what Jethro was suggesting to Moses in the wilderness.
Exactly.
Yeah, to set up a government to take care of the needs of the people.
And you can't take care of the needs of the people if you don't know what they are.
Yeah.
And in different villages, there are different needs for the people. Matter of fact, when you really think about it, with the story of Moses, once you're there in the wilderness, and what you're trying to figure out, what you're trying to do rather, is to be purged of all of those things that are adverse to you knowing and embracing who you are. So this wilderness that you are in is you. And the different voices in your village that lives inside of you are the things that's being purged. And what Jethro comes in is saying that you have to characterize and prioritize the direction that you desire to go in. And before you can do that, you have to know what's in you. And you have to hear from these different aspects of your being. For example, when we are embarked on this journey, we had to hear about what Christianity is about. We had to hear what the economy in this nation is about. What is it? What employment is about? How does all these aspects of community affect us as well as those around us? And now that you are understanding what's going on, within the society and how it affects you and others. Now you have the opportunity to to purge your attitude about those things that you held dear. And when you purge your attitude towards them, you begin to see how things should be as opposed to how they are and how they have been taught to you or presented to you. So when you take that and make application of it exponentially, then you begin to see why it is necessary to take inventory of the village that you live in, and communicate it to the one who leads, who you've chosen to lead you, so that it can be communicated to the rest of the people representative of those areas, so resolution can be brought to that for you and others within the confines of your village, but also the other villages are taken care of as well because they too have presented their needs. Does that make sense, Ron?
It does. Yes.
Anyone else have questions about that? Does that make sense, guys?
Yes, Pastor, that makes sense. However, what I wanted to ask is when you spoke of Jethro and you mentioned in terms of, the relationship with Moses, Jethro was inclined not to necessarily, just be in a total agreement with everything in terms of, the teachings, of Moses, but Jethro and his, I don't want to say tribe or clan, but Jethro had a difference in terms of how he saw things to be. So I think again, in terms of knowing oneself or knowing one tribe or one culture, isn't that something that again we should be conscientious about in terms of how we are taught or what influences may try to change our mentality in reference to what we know to be truth? I don't know if I'm being clear about my question.
You are. Jethro was a priest, which means that Jethro is representative of the spiritual essence of you. And representing the spiritual essence of who we are, that is what shows us what the attitudes that needs to be purged or need to be repurposed. And so when that is done, you begin to see that I am you and you are me, and that we are one. We're not individual villages, we are one village. And because we live in these physical bodies, we live in different geographical locations, but that does not separate us spiritually. And when we take into account the needs of the people in these different geographical locations, when we look at it from a spiritual perspective, that is when we join together to make sure that those different needs in those different spaces, geographical locations are taken care of. That is when we are truly recognizing that we are one entity spiritually. And the experience that we are having by virtue of taking care, making sure that all the needs of the human are taken care of, we then recognize that we are truly Elohim, one yet many. We are truly Elohim because what we are actually doing is caring for not only the people, but also the source of sustenance to maintain the body, which means that we are caring for the earth as well. And in doing so, we become as above, so is below. However, that has to take place from below, seeking to be as above is, meaning that has to take place for those who live in these bodies, those who live in these bodies must develop a desire, a hunger to be as above, meaning be spiritual, as opposed to simply embracing what our eyes see and accepting what we are told to accept. Any questions or comments? Does that make sense? I hope I'm clear with that. George?
No, that makes sense. I think it's just something, to to meditate on or contemplate in terms of how relationships, you know, and cultures, have its differences, but more importantly, being the one. And I believe we had some conversation maybe in the past in reference to Miriam and Moses in a relationship, with his father-in-law Moses. So again, it was just something that was on my mind, but it does make sense. I appreciate.
Well, thank you. Miriam challenged Moses. So meaning that the feminine aspect of Moses, or the feminine aspect of this person, was steeped in religion, doing things the way that it chose to do them. And when that challenge came, it said that she developed leprosy, and Moses dealt with that. So what it's saying is that the things that you have been birthing that are not congruent with spirituality, you must deal with them. And the way you deal with them is by virtue of purging yourself, or having this desire to purge yourself of all those things that you have birthed that is adversarial to the spiritual nature that you were created to embody. And when you do that, the everything that was that affected you because of what you birthed begins to heal itself within you, and you become a more viable spiritual entity, in that you're not being plagued by those concepts that you once birthed, that you once were given, impregnated with, and birthed yourself. And the way I'm saying this is this. I was impregnated with Christianity, and I birthed Christianity in others by virtue of what I taught them. And embracing that, they birthed it in others as well, which means that those things that were blinding us to our spiritual essence had to be purged from us. And it's actually a spiritual disease, a disease rather, that seeks to affect the spirit. That's how I should say it. And blind us to what the truth is. And by purging ourselves of that, we no longer birth that in anyone else. So we are not Miriam in that regard. We are the feminine aspects of us is in line with the cosmic mother, as well as the masculine aspects of us being in line with excuse me, the journey of masculinity and the unicity between masculinity and femininity for the purpose of balance. Does all that make sense?
It does make sense, but I have a comment question. I mean, I'm just wondering, I heard what you're saying about democracy, but to me, all of that, the way we lived in the South, no, we never experienced democracy. It was authoritarian rule in the South. That's what we grew up with. That's what our immediate ancestors grew up with, authoritarian rule. And I think we may have experienced a little bit of democracy within our tight-knit communities, but in terms of society, we never experienced democracy. But I think that also gave rise to us moving into religion and then grabbing hold of that as sort of our refuge, for lack of a better word. But religion also taught authoritarian rule. So we haven't in society, nor in our minds, nor in any way experienced democracy living in America.
Right.
So is that part of why we can't seem to purge ourselves of some of these things? Because that's all we've known our whole lives, our whole history of being in America.
Yes. And I agree with that. Why? Because number one, is true. That's the main thing. And it coincides with our desires for balance. We don't know what balance looks like because we never experienced it. A true democracy, we can see a pattern of that in African society based on our history prior to the interference, the colonization of the European. We get a glimpse of that, but what does it feel like? What does it look like in action? That's one of the things that we don't know, as you said. Now in our community, you're absolutely right. Think about this, especially those of us who grew up in the South. Our representatives were community leaders. And those community leaders, if there was one aspect or one section of our community where parents died, where children, parents died and left their children, then they would be taken in. If people in that part of the community couldn't do it, then that leadership in that community would talk to the leadership in the other community, and they would make provision for those children. How do I know that? Because during the outbreak of the deadly flu and tuberculosis, in our community, people were dying. And of course, I didn't live through this, but I heard about it through the people in our community. And my grandmama talked about how many people died and left children, and her daddy would take them in and give them his name if they chose that, and rear them as his own children. That's what I'm talking about. And I think, Audrey, that's what you're talking about. That was a glimpse of what democracy looks like. Because community made sure that the people in the community were taken care of. You're sick,
Right.
somebody wash your clothes and cook your meals, that kind of thing. Does that make sense, Audrey?
Yes, but we've never experienced democracy other than that.
Right. Absolutely not. Absolutely. Which means that we are the only people in America who has experienced democracy.
I hadn't
I mean,
thought
think
about
about
it that way. Yeah.
Huh?
I had not thought about it that way.
Well, look how difficult it is for other people of European descent to talk about community.
Yeah.
That's a huge difference.
Wow, that puts another spin on it.
Well, I think the Native Americans may have too,
Yeah.
but I guess they're us too.
They are us. Truly, let's just break the whole thing down about the Native Americans. The ones who are presented as Native Americans are immigrants that came across the Bering Strait. When Europeans first came to America, came to this landmass called America, as well as the Caribbean islands, the natives looked like us. If you look at the images of the Native Americans during the period when Europeans first embarked on the shores of this country, they looked like us. They were Africans who had been here for thousands of years.
Well, those are the ones I mean.
Oh, okay. Okay. Thank you, ma'am. Any questions or comments? No questions, no comments. Well, right?
I just agree on what you just said. That's all about
Oh, okay.
indigenous people.
Okay.
I think what you guys just pointed out though is absolutely amazing. I sit there and I listen to democracy, the threatened democracy of America. This threatens the democracy of America. And I'm thinking, why does that word keep popping up? But you're absolutely right. We are the only ones that actually have experienced that. And unfortunately, uh, maybe our generation, my generation, may be the last ones to have experienced it. Uh, I'm not sure we have a sense of community anymore. We don't have the communities like we once did,
Well, on
unfortunately.
a broad scale, on a broad, because there are pockets still
Yeah,
exist, because I live in a pocket of community, so on a broader scale, because matter of fact, we could not have survived without democracy in our communities. We
I,
we needed each other, you know.
yeah, you're right. I do remember that.
And we readily embrace it. When I started pastoring Gaffney, I met some of the people, Lipscombs, who are actually related to my grandmother. And I was talking to some of them, and I was told that when something happened in the Black community, that the church would hold trial at Island Creek. And it dawned on me, they did the same thing at St. Paul's. Of course, I wasn't born during that time, but to hear them talk about that, um, it was dealt with within the communities because white people didn't want to be bothered with it. Now, if that was a murder, that was a different story. But the other infractions, they dealt with it, and they made in community people the whole idea of a jury of your peers that didn't come from Europe. People hearing the case that you are presenting because they have experienced what you have experienced. That's your peers. This whole bonding system was never a thing that was instituted by Europeans. So the more we look at the scriptures, especially the Old Testament, as we put it, the more we began to understand the structure of African societies and how spiritual it is. Does that make sense?
Yes.
And the more we look at the New Testament, what we begin to see when we rightly divide that word is the essence of empathy, a desire for unicity among humanity. Can you see that? But the issue is that ignorance preserved the word by virtue of not understanding it and making those words be individual humans as opposed to concepts that we are to live by. Even when I was teaching that the Bible does not talk about what God is, the Bible talks about us. The Bible talks about who we're supposed to be. Even when I was teaching that, I did not understand it to the depth that I understand it now. But I knew that it was not talking about God, it was talking about us. And even if you read the story of Moses from a Christian perspective, it's talking about us. It's still talking about us, but not to the extent that we understand it now. Does that make sense? So what are we doing? We are interpreting the concepts of life in search of truth so that life as it was intended to be can exist on this celestial ball called Earth and can be experienced in a physical way by spiritual entities. Does that make sense so far? So we are the embodiment of our Creator seeking to experience this physical, have this physical experience that we have to create. The Creator is not going to bring into existence a physical experience of spirituality. It is up to us to do that. And that is a spiritual experience of spirituality is shown to us if we choose to read the scripture with our eye rather than our eyes, if we choose to solicit the understanding of the scripture from our ancestors as opposed to from theologians. That is the time when we began to see clearly not only who we are, but how we are supposed to interact with each other in this earth. And by virtue of doing that, we will have a physical environment that is no different than the spiritual environment that exists beyond where we are right now, meaning beyond our sight right now. The experience with the physical experience that the spiritual is supposed to experience, we have gotten a glimpse of it, but we are now moving in a direction that will give all of us a spiritual physical experience. Now, what is a physical experience that speaks to a spiritual beings having this physical experience? What does that look like? The experience of physical beings, the spiritual being having a physical experience, and is when we get epiphanies about the spiritual wisdom, the spiritual truth that we are to expound upon. When we are meditating, or when we are in in the presence of ancestors, and our minds are clear of the physical attributes of our environment that are adverse to our spirituality. That is one of those things, that periods when we have that experience. When you sit there and you read a story about the one who deemed to be your enemy, something tragically happening to them, and you feel that internally, you feel for them. That is a physical, spiritual experience. If you only feel that for those who are close to you, that's a problem. Why? Because the expectation is for us to experience that when we are dealing with each other. If Trump was injured seriously and you don't feel anything, that's a problem. Why? Because what you are doing is blaming a human for doing something that it was created to do. And that is to create friction so that we, the African especially, can bring into existence a spiritual experience based upon love and kindness. Make sense?
Yeah.
Now, of course, it's greater than that, but those are some of the experiences that we are having now as we travel this journey. Questions, comments?
I guess one of the things that came to me when you were talking was the importance of putting stuff like this in the macro, because we talk about a lot of stuff, and a lot of times we don't open the book, but all of it is connected and all of it is real and all of it has to do with mankind, and all of it puts us all in the present. And that's what the macro does. It puts us all in the present, that there is no past or future. It's all here for all of mankind. So the discussion was not only worthwhile, it was appreciated. So thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments? It is my deep desire that the things that we have expounded upon today resonate deeply with you. It's important to us to know that the truth that not only we seek, but the truth that we glean from the wisdom of life as a direct result of embracing and honoring our ancestors. It is our desire that it resonates with you to the extent that it changes your life for the better. And it gives you a greater sense of stability in your life so that regardless of what you encounter, you are able to maintain the essence of who you are. And that is maintaining the essence of Elohim, maintaining the essence of the children of Akabalon. And when I say children of Akabalon, I'm talking about all humans, because all humans are children of Akabalon, because they came from the womb of a Kabalonian woman. Does that make sense? So, having said that, there is a rift between Trump and Musk, between two energies of Europeans fighting. And that energy between the Europeans who are battling each other, that energy is the force that splits or that tears the fiber of cohesiveness that appeared to exist between all Europeans. And when you look at the essence of the energy of Trump, what we see is a marriage between money and government. And that marriage ceremony was performed by Christianity. When we look at Musk, we see the energy of racism and money seeking to control the essence of the government. And this marriage also is ordained by Christianity. And as we move forward and see and embrace who we are, we begin to see that this is the dismantling of European dominance worldwide, so that humanity can have a taste of what it's like to be in unison with its creator and to have interrelationships with other humans without seeking to take anything from them or without seeking to manipulate them, simply interacting with humans because we are human. And that is the epitome of the spiritual essence of who we are, having a human experience. That is the reason we fight so hard to understand the wisdom of life and seek to present it to anyone who would listen and make sure that it is in the macro, because we are the vanguard, the tip of the spear for bringing humanity to a place of balance. And we seek your energy, your presence, even if you don't say anything, because it strengthens our resolve to do whatever it takes to bring humanity to a space where it meets in unity. I'm done. Thank you.
Thank you. Questions or comments, anyone? Okay, it's 12:22. I guess a lot has been said. You guys want to pause it here, and we will resume tomorrow evening at 6 p.m. So hope you have a great day, rest of your day.
You
And,
do the same. See you guys.
Yes, sir. Look forward to tomorrow. Thank you.
Take care, family.
Everyone.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you,
Bye.
everyone. Have a good evening.